My name's Alex. I'm 27, and I used to think that being the quiet one in the family meant peace. That if you worked hard, didn't complain, and kept your head down, eventually people would notice, maybe even respect you. I didn't expect applause, just a little acknowledgement. Maybe a thank you now and then. But if you're reading this, you probably already know how stories like mine usually go. Growing up, I was always the responsible kid. The one who turned in homework on time, who didn't sneak out, who never asked for anything too big. My younger brother, Ryan, on the other hand, he was the star. Always loud, always bold, always breaking things and somehow getting praised for it. He could crash Dad's truck into a mailbox and still get ice cream on the way home. Boys will be boys, Mom would laugh. I'd bring home straight A's, and she'd barely look up from her phone. It never really bothered me when I was younger. I figured maybe that's just how families worked. Some kids are louder, some quieter. But as I got older, that silence stopped feeling neutral. It felt like something was being taken from me. Time, energy, even money, and no one ever gave anything back. When I was 21, Dad got into a rough patch with his business. Or, to put it bluntly, he got caught lying about expenses and had to pay back thousands. He didn't ask me for help, not directly. But Mom did. One phone call, right after I started my first real job out of college. Just a small loan, Alex. You're the only one we can count on. I wired over $3,500 that same day. No questions, no hesitation, and no thank you. That was the beginning. Over the next few years, the small loans piled up. There was always a new reason. Ryan's tuition, which he flunked out of, Mom's medical bills, for a checkup she never went to, a busted dishwasher, a car battery, a parking ticket. I was making decent money, sure, but I wasn't rich. I lived in a modest one-bedroom, drove the same used Honda from college, skipped vacations, packed my lunch every day. I told myself it was temporary. That one day, when things settled down, they'd realize how much I'd done. Instead, they just got used to it. The real gut punch came about 2 months before my graduation from my master's program. I'd done it part-time while working full-time. It nearly wrecked my sleep schedule and social life, but I finished. No one in my family had a graduate degree. I thought this might finally be the moment they'd be proud. I sent out invites for a small backyard party I planned myself. Nothing fancy, just food, some music, and the people who mattered. I even paid to fly Ryan in from across the country. He'd gotten a new job, marketing, I think, and I thought it would be nice to have him there. He RSVP'd, maybe, and didn't message again until the day before. Yeah, I'll come. Don't make it weird. The party started off okay. A few coworkers showed up, my best friend Josh brought a gift, and even my neighbor from upstairs stopped by with a plant I'd probably kill in 2 weeks. Then my family arrived. My mom in her church dress and heels too high for a backyard. My dad with his usual smug face like he was doing me a favor by showing up, and Ryan in sunglasses and a hoodie like he was on his way to Coachella. I didn't expect a speech or anything, but I figured maybe a small toast, "We're proud of you, Alex," kind of moment. Something. Anything. Instead, Dad raised his beer midway through the evening and tapped a spoon against it. "Let's give a round of applause," he said loudly, "to the real star of the family tonight, Ryan, for landing that awesome new job in LA." People clapped. I smiled tight-lipped. Maybe he was just joking. Honestly, Dad continued, Alex has always been the book-smart one, but Ryan's got grit. That hustle, that instinct to get out there and make it happen. My mom nodded and clinked her glass against his. And he did it all without hiding behind textbooks, she added with a chuckle. I laughed too. The kind of laugh you make when your chest is tight and you're praying no one notices your hands shaking. Then my sister leaned in and whispered, "At least Ryan earned it. I mean, no offense, but anyone can get a degree if they hide long enough." I looked at her, and for a second, I wasn't sure I heard right. But she just sipped her drink and turned away. I didn't say anything. I didn't flip the table or shout or storm off. I just stood there, completely still, watching the people I'd spent years quietly supporting, financially, emotionally, everything, toast the person who'd never lifted a finger for them. I wasn't even angry. Not yet. It felt more like a switch flipping off. After they left, I went inside and opened my laptop. See, they never asked where the money came from. The mortgage payments I'd been helping with? Under my name. The credit card debt I'd helped pay down for Dad? My account. Even Mom's medical insurance. which she kept bragging about getting for free after her last visit. She never noticed it was tacked onto my own employer plan. They were living on a scaffolding of my goodwill, and they didn't even realize it. That night, I started making a list. It wasn't about revenge, not yet. It was just inventory. What had I paid for? What was in my name? What could I legally walk away from? By the time the clock hit 2 a.m., I had a spreadsheet open with tabs, totals, deadlines. I wasn't tired. I wasn't sad. I was awake in a way I hadn't been for years. But the real plan didn't take shape until I found an old email chain. One I'd kept buried, never replied to. It was from someone Dad really didn't want to hear from again, and it gave me the exact leverage I needed. So I drafted one final email. Calm, professional, impossible to misread. Scheduled it for 7 a.m. the next morning. And then I sat back. Because the sun was going to rise, and with it, so was everything I'd kept quiet for too long. At exactly 6:59 a.m., I was already awake. I didn't sleep that night, not out of nerves, but because something in me had finally shifted, like standing still your whole life, then realizing your legs were working the whole time. I had made coffee, showered, and sat at my desk with the screen open. 1 minute left. I refreshed the email scheduler, watching the seconds tick down like I was waiting for a rocket launch. When it hit 7 a.m., I saw the message move from scheduled to sent, and I leaned back in my chair. I didn't include drama. No sarcasm. Just facts. Attachments. Receipts. It went out to my mom, dad, sister, and Ryan. And it was titled, Financial Accounts and Immediate Changes. Inside, it laid out exactly what I'd done, not in anger, not out of spite, just clean separation. I listed the credit card accounts I had closed or removed myself from. The joint account Dad had linked to his PayPal without asking, gone. The health insurance that Mom had been using through my employer plan, canceled effective immediately. Their mortgage? I had been making partial payments as a co-signer for years, not because I was on the title, but because I was the only one who hadn't missed a payment. But starting that day, I was no longer contributing. I also clarified that the taxes they'd asked me to look over and then quietly expected me to pay, I had refiled those forms and submitted an audit request to the IRS. If they wanted to explain the deductions for a small business that technically hadn't existed in 3 years, they could do it without me. And at the end, I wrote one line that I reread maybe 100 times before sending. You treated my silence like approval. Consider this the final time you mistake the two. By 7:14 a.m., my phone was lighting up. First it was Mom, 6 calls in 2 minutes. Then Dad. Then Ryan. Then the family group chat, which had been silent for months except for memes and birthday reminders, exploded. Mom, Alex, what is this? What are you doing? Dad? You ungrateful little. It cut off? I assumed he realized texting threats probably wasn't smart. Ryan, dude. Seriously, you're making this a thing? Just undo it. Talk to me. I didn't respond. I turned off notifications, sat quietly, sipping my coffee, and let the chaos unfold outside of me. By 8 a.m., I got a work call. Apparently, Mom had called my office line trying to talk sense into me, which meant telling HR that I was mentally unstable and might be making big mistakes. Thankfully, HR knew me well. I'd been at that company for 5 years and had earned enough respect that their reaction was more curious than concerned. I calmly explained the situation, documented everything, and reassured them that there was no cause for alarm. If anything, it cemented my decision. They weren't just manipulative. They were desperate to maintain the illusion that I was still under their thumb. Later that morning, my sister, the one who said Ryan earned it, tried the emotional route. She sent me a long message about how families should stick together, how I was always too sensitive, and how this would ruin everything. But she ended with a line that sealed her fate. We all had our roles, Alex. Yours was to support. You knew that. I stared at those words for a long time. Yours was to support. That wasn't misunderstanding. That was clarity. That was them finally saying the quiet part out loud. I spent the next few hours tying up loose ends. I canceled the auto transfers I'd set up years ago. I closed the shared emergency fund that I had funded entirely myself. I revoked access to my Netflix, Spotify, and even the family phone plan, which, surprise, had also been under my name. Each task felt like peeling off a weighted vest I didn't know I'd been wearing. But the real storm hit that evening. I came home from work and found a voicemail from my dad. His voice was flat, low, like he was trying very hard not to yell. You think you're making a statement? Fine. You made it. But actions have consequences, Alex. Don't come crawling back when you realize what you've done. I played it twice, then deleted it. By then, I had already made one last move, the one that would push them completely over the edge. Remember that email chain I mentioned? The one I'd buried for years? It was from the co-founder of Dad's failed consulting business, a man named Gerald, who had disappeared quietly after things started going south. Gerald had reached out to me years ago, hinting that he was willing to cooperate if things ever got ugly. Back then, I didn't know what that meant. But now, I was ready to find out. I scheduled a meeting for the following week. Gerald agreed immediately, because there was one more thing my family had forgotten in their rush to turn me into their personal safety net. The business license that Dad defaulted on? It had my name on it too. And if what Gerald told me during that next meeting turned out to be true, then not only had they bled me dry, they'd used my name to cover up something much worse. But that part of the story hadn't fully unfolded yet, because just as I was locking up for the night, I got a knock on my door. Slow, repetitive, and very, very familiar. I looked through the peephole, and my stomach dropped. It wasn't Mom. It wasn't Dad. It was Ryan, wearing that same smug hoodie from the party. He wasn't alone. Behind Ryan stood two people I didn't recognize at first, both in business casual clothes, arms crossed, wearing the kind of expressions that don't belong on a doorstep. One was holding a leather folio. The other had a phone out, already recording. Ryan tilted his head toward the peephole, like he somehow knew I was watching. "Come on, man," he said, voice muffled through the door. "You're not going to make this worse, are you?" I didn't open it. I didn't even move. I just stood there, my fingers resting on the lock. The guy with the phone spoke up. "Mr. Taylor, we're here on behalf of your father and Taylor Solutions, LLC. We need to have a quick conversation about a few recent account closures and discrepancies in your shared business filings. You can cooperate voluntarily, or we can come back with paperwork." Paperwork? Now they were playing official? Ryan leaned closer, pressing a palm flat to the door. "You really want this to get messy? Just talk to them. Bro, smooth this out before it becomes something it doesn't need to be." That was when it all clicked. This wasn't a conversation. It was damage control. They weren't worried about me walking away. They were scared of what else I might take with me. I stepped back from the door slowly and quietly. I didn't respond. I didn't yell. I didn't feed into it. Instead, I opened my laptop again and pulled up the files I'd saved the night before. Dozens of PDFs, bank statements, email chains, even screenshots of texts from my dad asking me to temporarily co-sign some small business expenses. He never used the word illegal, but the numbers didn't lie, especially when they were paired with Gerald's emails, which had only gotten more interesting the deeper I read. Apparently, back in 2020, my dad had used my name and SSN to apply for a small business relief loan, one of those fast-track pandemic programs meant to keep businesses afloat. I never saw the funds, but I was listed as a 50% co-owner on every application. The amount? $87,000. They'd used my name, my information, and now, with everything unraveling, they were desperate to shift the blame back onto me. I stayed quiet by the door, listening. The guy with the folio sighed and muttered something about getting legal involved. Then I heard retreating footsteps. Ryan was the last to move, muttering, "Unreal," under his breath like I was the problem. Once they were gone, I waited. Full 5 minutes. Then I called my friend Josh, the only person who knew everything. "Hey," I said as soon as he picked up. "Remember when I said I was done? I think they're trying to pin it all on me." Josh didn't even pause. "You want me to come over?" "No. I need you to send that file. The one we saved at your place. And can you make sure it's timestamped?" "Already did," he said. "Send it to your backup email, too, just in case." He paused before hanging up. "You okay, man?" I didn't answer right away, because I wasn't sure. There's a strange numbness that comes after betrayal, like you're watching someone else's life from the outside. I felt it wash over me as I sat on the floor beside the door, laptop open on one side, empty coffee mug on the other. My whole family, the people I had bent over backwards for, weren't just ungrateful. They were dangerous. And now that I'd stopped being useful, they were trying to erase me from the narrative entirely, or worse, replace me with a scapegoat. But I wasn't done, because Gerald had agreed to something bigger than a meeting. He'd offered documentation, emails, transaction records, proof that the loan was misused, proof that I was never involved, and, most importantly, a name, the third person listed on a shell account I had never even heard of until that morning. I took a breath. Then I opened my calendar and rescheduled a meeting I'd been putting off for weeks with a lawyer, not just any lawyer, a corporate fraud specialist, one who'd already handled cases just like this and who didn't flinch when I gave him the context. He'd said 4 words when I explained everything to him. We can bury them. And I wasn't sure I believed him at first. But now I was ready to try. Because this wasn't about a graduation party anymore. It wasn't about hurt feelings or being overlooked or even the years of thankless support I'd given. It was about identity theft, fraud, and the very real possibility that my parents, the people who raised me, were prepared to destroy me to protect their illusion of control. So I began compiling. I printed everything, created secure backups, logged every message, every call, every shred of pressure they applied. And then I started writing something of my own. A full report. Not for the police. Not yet. This one was personal. It was for them. And when it was finished, I was going to make sure it reached them the same way their betrayal had reached me. Without warning. Without apology. And impossible to ignore. 3 days after Ryan showed up at my door with his 2 suited messengers, I received a letter from their lawyer. It was thinly veiled, filled with phrases like misunderstanding between parties, amicable resolution, and my personal favorite. It would be unfortunate if this matter escalated. Unfortunate for who? They attached a proposed settlement agreement. Laughable, really. In it, they generously offered to remove me from all remaining accounts in exchange for my written confirmation that I had no pending claims or knowledge of misuse of funds under the Taylor Solutions LLC banner. If I signed, they'd agree to stop contacting me and forgive any financial misunderstandings between us. It was bait, a cowardly attempt to get ahead of whatever they thought I might do next. But I wasn't just angry anymore. I wasn't even bitter. I was focused, because while they were busy scrambling to cover their tracks, I was already 10 steps ahead. That same afternoon, I met Gerald in person for the first time. He looked exactly how I expected: sharp, gray hair, expensive watch, and a tired sort of smirk that said he'd seen things go sideways too many times to be surprised anymore. We met in a quiet office in Midtown, where he slid a flash drive across the table. "I kept copies," he said simply. "Not for this, honestly, but because your father always had short memory." I plugged it into my laptop and opened the files. Bank transfers, fraudulent payroll statements, loan documents with my forged signature, even a recorded call between Dad and one of his old suppliers, where he said, "Just run it through Alex's side. He won't check. He owes us anyway." I didn't even flinch. Because the worst part wasn't hearing it. It was how unsurprised I felt. Like I'd been waiting for proof my whole life that they saw me as less than human. Just a resource. A buffer. A wall to hide behind. And I had one final play. On Monday morning, exactly 1 week after my graduation party, I sat across from my attorney. A woman named Marla whose face never changed no matter how insane the details got. And we went over every piece of evidence. Every dollar. Every manipulation. Every signature I never gave. She nodded, occasionally making notes. "This is airtight," she said eventually. "You're going to have options." "What kind of options?" "Well, we could sue. Multiple angles. Fraud, identity theft, financial abuse. But that's messy. Public. And if your goal is to ruin them, it'll do it, eventually. Or," she slid another paper across the desk, "you can file a federal report. Quietly. Let the government handle it. Small business loan fraud's a felony. Especially pandemic loans. If even half of what you showed me checks out, your dad is looking at prison time. And if your mom knowingly benefited, she's in this too." I looked at the paper. It wasn't revenge I was after anymore. It was freedom. I signed it. And the silence that followed was the loudest moment of my life. The fallout didn't come overnight. These things take time. But the first domino dropped less than 2 weeks later. My parents' house, the one I'd been silently helping fund for over 4 years, was hit with an official audit notice. Then their accounts were frozen, pending investigation into over $90,000 in misused funds. My dad called me 4 times in one day, then texted, "You really doing this to your family? Hope your degree keeps you warm." I didn't respond. My mom tried once. She left a voicemail that started with fake tears and ended in a full-throated scream. You're a monster. We made you who you are. We gave you everything. And all I could do was laugh. Because what they gave me was debt, silence, and an endless list of unpaid favors. Meanwhile, my sister, always the neutral observer, the passive accomplice, was suddenly sending me messages saying she didn't know what was happening and didn't want to take sides. But it was too late for neutrality. When the dam breaks, you don't get to pretend you weren't upstream with a hammer. Ryan? He went radio silent for a while. Then I saw him post on LinkedIn that he was exploring new opportunities after an unexpected change in circumstances. I guess that marketing job wasn't as bulletproof as he thought. But the real moment, the one I'll never forget, came on a cold Thursday afternoon when I got a certified letter at my door. It was from the federal office handling the pandemic relief loan investigation. Inside was a simple update. The preliminary review confirms sufficient evidence of forgery, misrepresentation of identity, and misuse of government relief funds under the name Taylor Solutions, LLC. Proceedings are now advancing to formal inquiry. You are not considered a subject of the investigation. Not a subject. Not a suspect. Just a witness. Free. I read that line 5 times. Then I sat down at my kitchen table and exhaled in a way I hadn't done in years. Not since the day I first wired that small loan to my parents without question. Not since the first time I picked up the tab at dinner because they conveniently forgot their wallet. For the first time in my adult life, I wasn't carrying anyone else. And it felt weightless. Months passed. They never apologized. Never reached out again. Not sincerely, anyway. But word got around. My aunt, the only relative I still respected, called me one evening. "They say you ruined them," she said bluntly. I didn't answer. She paused, then added, "But I know the truth, Alex. You didn't ruin them. They just ran out of places to hide." I think that was the first time I cried. Not loud or messy, just a quiet, slow unraveling. The kind of tears that come when you realize you're finally done. I graduated. I cut them off. I saved myself. They called me cold, bitter, ungrateful. But you know what I really was? Free. And they could keep their toasts. Because I had something better now. A future, and no one left to steal it.